What would you do if you discovered that your own child was planning to throw you into a nursing home just to steal your house? This is not fiction. This is my life. And the shocking truth I overheard one evening changed everything forever. My name is Arthur Miller. I'm 68 years old, a widower, and I thought I had done everything right. I built a home with my own two hands in Denver, Colorado. I raised my daughter, Laura Sterling Morgan, in that house. I gave her the kind of life my late wife Margaret and I never had growing up: college tuition, a dream wedding, and endless sacrifices that left my hands blistered and my back aching, but my heart proud. That house wasn't just brick and wood, it was our family's soul, worth nearly $1 million on today's market. I believed Laura treasured it as much as I did. I believed she treasured me, but I was wrong. It started with something ordinary, almost sweet. The phone rang just after dinner, and the caller ID made me smile despite myself. Dad. How are you holding up? Laura's voice was warm, familiar, full of the kind of affection that made me think, even for a second, that I wasn't alone in this world. We spoke about simple things: the conference she and her husband Daniel were attending in Phoenix, the meatloaf I'd cooked, the news I was planning to watch. When she said, "I love you, Dad," my chest tightened. I whispered it back, hanging on to that little thread of comfort. But then the accident happened. She didn't hang up properly, and that's when my world collapsed. Through the faint static, I heard voices, muffled, but clear enough. It was Laura and Daniel. Their words cut through me sharper than any blade. He forgot to turn off the stove again. He's deteriorating. It's time for a nursing home. Daniel's voice was cold, calculated. And then Laura, my little girl, the child Margaret and I had built our lives around, spoke words I will never forget. The house is worth almost $1 million now. With Denver's market, we could probably get $900,000, maybe more. That money could buy us the Boulder home we've always wanted. My hand froze on the receiver. I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears, the air turning to ice around me. They weren't just talking about my safety. They were plotting my removal, my exile, and the sale of the very house where my wife had died in my arms. Family betrayal, the ultimate nightmare. I sat in silence, listening to my daughter laugh, as if my life, my memories, my sacrifices were nothing more than numbers in a real estate deal. She told Daniel, "He has no idea. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely." That was the moment something inside me snapped. The truth was out, and it was merciless. I was not a father in their eyes anymore. I was a burden, a paycheck, an inheritance waiting to be cashed. But what they didn't know, what they could never imagine, is that I was listening, and I was not nearly as weak as they believed. I sat frozen in my recliner, the phone still pressed to my ear, my heart pounding like a drum. Laura's voice, once so sweet, now carried a sharpness I had never heard before. "He's so grateful just to hear from me." "Daniel," she said with a mocking laugh, the kind of laugh that didn't belong to the little girl I had once rocked to sleep. That laugh sliced through me, cruel and hollow, as though my entire existence had been reduced to a punchline. She wasn't speaking like a daughter anymore. She was speaking like a strategist, like a wolf circling prey that no longer had the strength to fight back. Then came Daniel's voice, measured, clinical, the voice of a man who saw me not as family, but as an equation. The Denver market is booming. With square footage like that, original owner, immaculate maintenance, we could list it at $900,000, maybe even more. Cash buyers would eat it up. We take the profit, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally upgrade to Boulder, that house with the mountain view. He said it so calmly, as if I were already gone, as if my life's work was nothing more than leverage for his ambitions. Laura giggled again, a sound that made my chest tighten with both anger and grief. "God, you should have seen him tonight," she whispered, lowering her voice but not enough. He was so thankful just to hear from me, so desperate for my attention. He has no idea. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely. Strike. That word. Strike. Like I was a weak animal waiting to be put down. Like I was an investment maturing on their timeline. My knuckles turned white around the receiver as her words replayed in my mind. My daughter, the girl I had carried on my shoulders at the county fair, the teenager I had driven to prom, the young woman I had walked down the aisle with tears in my eyes, she was now laughing at how gullible I was. My throat tightened. My stomach knotted. In that instant, memories of every sacrifice I had ever made came flooding back with a cruelty I could barely withstand. The long shifts pouring concrete, the weekends building custom cabinetry, the nights Margaret rubbed the ache out of my shoulders while I calculated how to pay for Laura's spring semester. Every dollar I had scraped together, every extra hour I had given to build her future, all of it now twisted into ammunition against me. Daniel's voice returned, steady and assured. It's the right move. Laura, he's becoming a liability. We can't risk him leaving the stove on, burning the place down. If we wait too long, the market might cool. We act now, and we secure our future. He'll be safe, and we'll finally have the life we deserve. Safe. That was his word. Safe. As if stripping me from the only home I had ever known was some kind of mercy. I felt my chest constrict, like the walls of my living room were closing in. The grandfather clock ticked relentlessly, each second driving the truth deeper into my mind. I was no longer a father in their eyes. I was an obstacle, a burden, a stepping stone to the bolder dream house they had painted in their imaginations. I stared at Margaret's photograph on the mantel. Her eyes seemed alive in that frozen frame, filled with warmth, but also with warning. I could almost hear her voice, soft but firm, Arthur. Don't let them take everything we built. Don't let them erase you. My heart ached with the realization that she had been right all along, too generous, too trusting, too blinded by love to see the storm forming in my own family. That night, as Laura's laughter and Daniel's calculations echoed through the phone, a part of me shattered forever. My daughter, my only child, had chosen profit over blood, convenience over loyalty, ambition over love, and I sat there in the dark, gripping the receiver, realizing that the shocking truth was undeniable in their eyes. I was not a father anymore. I was a burden with a price tag. The night before they left for Phoenix, we sat together at my dining table, the same oak table Margaret and I had saved for months to buy, the one where Laura had once spilled juice and cried because she thought she ruined it. I had polished it earlier that afternoon, the wood gleaming under the warm light, almost as if I were preparing for a moment of truth. They arrived smiling, arms full of groceries and a bottle of wine, the perfect image of a devoted daughter and her caring husband. To anyone watching from the outside, it would have looked like a normal family dinner, even a loving one. But to me, sitting there with the weight of their betrayal still ringing in my ears, it felt like theater, a play where I was both the audience and the mark. Laura kissed my cheek as she placed the bags on the counter. Dad, we thought we'd cook tonight. You shouldn't be doing all the work. Her voice was syrupy sweet, almost exaggerated, and for a split second I wondered if she knew I had overheard her the night before. But no. Her eyes sparkled with practiced affection, the kind a politician wears on stage. Daniel followed, patting me on the shoulder. Arthur, you really are the most generous man I know. You've done so much for us. Tonight, just relax. Let us take care of you for once. Those words, take care of you, they stung like a wasp because I knew exactly what they meant when whispered behind closed doors: nursing home, asset liquidation, Boulder dream house. I forced a smile, hiding the storm building inside me. Margaret had always said I had a terrible poker face, but that night I managed. We cooked together, or rather they cooked while I sat at the table, watching. Laura moved gracefully around the kitchen she had grown up in, Daniel opening the cabinets like he belonged there. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic. Laughter filled the space. And for a moment, I almost let myself believe it. Almost. But then Laura looked at Daniel when she thought I wasn't paying attention. A quick glance, a subtle nod, a conspiratorial smirk. It was gone in a flash, but I caught it. That was the real Laura, the one the camera would later expose not a caring daughter, but an actress playing her part until the curtain dropped. Dinner was roasted chicken with mashed potatoes. Comfort food meant to soothe. Laura poured me a glass of wine, lifting her glass toward mine. "To family," she said. Daniel echoed her. Their voices harmonized like a rehearsed line. I clinked my glass against theirs, but my stomach churned. I couldn't taste the wine, only the bitter irony. As we ate, Laura began her monologue, carefully scripted. "Dad, Daniel and I have been talking. We think it might be good for you to have more support around the house. Just little things, groceries, bills, someone to check in on you when we're busy." She paused, engaging my reaction, her fork poised delicately over her plate. I chewed slowly, nodded, and answered softly. "That's thoughtful. Sweetheart." Inside, though, I could hear the echo of her real voice from the night before. "He's deteriorating. He's a burden." Daniel jumped in, his tone full of false warmth. "We just want you safe, Arthur. We've seen too many stories about elderly folks forgetting the stove or slipping in the shower. We couldn't live with ourselves if something happened to you." He looked at me with mock sincerity, but his eyes betrayed calculation. Safe, in his dictionary, meant profitable. I glanced at Margaret's empty chair across the table, imagining her sitting there, her lips pressed in that disapproving line she used when Laura lied about homework. She would have seen right through this charade. She would have called it out with quiet authority. I missed her presence more in that moment than I had in months. Laura kept the conversation flowing, asking about my day, reminding me to take my vitamins, even suggesting that I join a local senior group to make new friends. On the surface, it was all love and concern, but I knew better. Every word was rehearsed, every gesture designed to ease me into compliance. They wanted me pliable, grateful, ready to accept their plans without a fight. I let them talk, nodding at the right times, offering the occasional chuckle. But beneath the surface, my mind was racing. I was studying them, cataloging every smirk, every exchange of glances, every hollow word. I knew that someday soon, the camera I had chosen would catch this same performance, but without my blind acceptance, it would show the world exactly who they were. After dinner, Laura insisted on washing the dishes while Daniel dried. From the living room, I heard them whispering, their voices low, but not low enough. "He bought it," Laura said. "See, he trusts us completely." Daniel chuckled softly. "Good. We'll move quickly once we're back from Phoenix." I gripped the arms of my recliner, holding myself steady. They thought I was fooled. They thought my trust was their weapon. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that their every word, their every smile, their every false gesture would soon be captured, preserved, and turned against them. That night, as they kissed my cheek goodbye and promised to call from Phoenix, I smiled back, the perfect picture of a grateful old father. But in my heart, I knew the truth. They were the actors, and I was about to rewrite the script. After they left that night, the house fell into a silence so heavy it seemed to press against my chest. I sat alone in my recliner, the leather cracked from years of use, staring at the mantel where Margaret's photo rested in its silver frame. Her smile was gentle, eternal, a smile that once steadied me through sleepless nights and endless shifts. But now her eyes felt different, almost alive, as if they were staring into mine, demanding answers I wasn't ready to give. The memories came like a flood, one after another, relentless and sharp. I remembered writing check after check for Laura's tuition at the University of Colorado, a total of $48,000 across 4 years. I remembered the sting of exhaustion from back-to-back shifts on construction sites, the grit of concrete dust in my hair, the ache in my joints that even Margaret's hands couldn't always soothe. We had eaten beans and rice for weeks at a time just so Laura could have textbooks, lab fees, the chance to step into a future brighter than ours. Every dollar I gave was carved out of my flesh, every sacrifice stitched into the fabric of her life. Then there was her wedding. She cried when I told her we could only afford a modest ceremony, maybe $5,000 or $8,000 if we stretched. She wanted her dream wedding, and those tears cut me deeper than any blade. So I worked weekends for 6 months straight, laying hardwood floors under the table for a friend's contracting business, coming home with my back screaming, my knees swollen, my hands raw. In the end, I handed her $32,000 so she could have her day. I still remember her words as we danced under the golden lights of the reception hall. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world. I'll never forget this." But she had forgotten everything, forgotten me. I looked around the house and saw ghosts everywhere. The burgundy sofa where Laura once curled up to do homework while I built a coffee table in the garage. The bay window Margaret had begged for after seeing it in a magazine, the one I told her we couldn't afford. "You want it? You'll have it," I had promised her, cutting beams late into the night, crawling on the floor until my back screamed, but making sure it was perfect. Margaret loved sitting there with her mystery novels, a cup of tea in hand, her smile framed by the light pouring in. That window had cost me 6 months of overtime, but it had given her a sanctuary. Every corner of this house held pieces of me, of us, of the life we built, and now, my only daughter, the child who took her first wobbly steps from our refrigerator into Margaret's outstretched arms, wanted to sell it all. She wanted to erase decades of sweat and sacrifice, trading memories for cash, loyalty for convenience. My fists clenched, my nails digging into my palms. I could hear her voice from the night before, mocking me. "He trusts us completely." My trust had become her weapon. Margaret's voice came back to me then, clear as the day she said it. "Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." She had warned me years ago, when I insisted on covering Laura's spring semester, working double shifts to do it. Margaret had touched my shoulder gently, worry in her eyes. "Arthur, you're working yourself to death. She needs to learn gratitude." I had brushed it off, saying, "She deserves better than we had. She's smart enough for anything." Margaret had sighed and kissed the top of my head, but she had been right. I sat there, my heart breaking, as her words echoed in the hollow chambers of the house. All those years, I had thought love meant sacrifice without question. I had given Laura everything, believing she would carry it with pride and gratitude. Instead, she had turned my generosity into entitlement, my devotion into weakness. And Daniel had been more than happy to exploit it, to treat me like a liability on a balance sheet. The clock ticked in the hallway, the same grandfather clock Margaret gave me on our 15th anniversary. Its sound had always been comforting, a steady heartbeat in our home. But now it felt like a countdown, each tick a reminder that my time as a father, as a man respected in his own house, was running out. My eyes burned with unshed tears, but beneath the sorrow, something harder began to form. Betrayal had carved a wound, but it had also sparked a fire. I was not as helpless as they believed. I was not confused, not weak, not ready to be packed away like an old piece of furniture. Margaret's words were no longer a warning. They were a command. Don't let her forget. Don't let her erase what we built. That night, sitting in the shadows of my living room, I made a silent promise to Margaret, to myself, and to the house that held every drop of my blood and sweat. I would not go quietly. I would not be discarded. And Laura would learn, whether she wanted to or not, exactly who her father was. The morning after that suffocating dinner, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Betrayal has a strange way of sharpening a man's mind. For weeks I had wandered through life in a fog, weighed down by loneliness and grief. But now my path was clear. Laura and Daniel had written the script for my exile. but I would rewrite it. They thought I was helpless, confused, ready to hand them the keys to everything Margaret and I built. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The first step was legal. I drove to the modest brick building on Colfax Avenue where Richard Coleman's law office stood. Richard had met Margaret and me years earlier when she was first diagnosed with cancer. He was patient, sharp, and had the kind of calm demeanor that made you feel like the world could still be managed if you had the right paperwork. When I stepped into his office, the smell of fresh coffee and polished wood greeted me. Richard rose from his desk, hand extended. "Arthur Miller, it's been a long time. I'm sorry again for your loss." I nodded, sat down, and wasted no time. I told him everything: the overheard call, the plan to sell my house, the threat of a nursing home. His face remained calm, but his eyes flickered with disapproval. "Arthur," he said, leaning forward, "legally speaking, you have nothing to worry about. The house is yours alone since Margaret's passing. No liens, no cosigners. Your daughter cannot sell it, cannot force you into care, cannot touch a cent of your assets without your consent." Relief washed over me, quickly followed by resolve. "Then I want to sell it myself," I said. Richard tilted his head. "That's a big step." Why? I looked him straight in the eye. "Because I want them to come home and find nothing left. I want them to feel the loss they planned for me." He didn't argue. Instead, he picked up his pen and began to outline the process. Within 2 days, I sat across from Stephen Carter, a real estate agent Richard recommended. Stephen was younger than me, early 40s, with sharp eyes and the enthusiasm of a man who thrived on quick deals. When he stepped into my house, his jaw dropped slightly. "Mr. Miller, this place is immaculate. Original hardwood, custom bay window, flawless maintenance. This will move fast. I can get you $890,000 cash offer, 10 business days." My heart thudded. That number was more than Laura and Daniel had smugly calculated. I nodded. "Do it." By the end of the week, papers were signed, inspections passed, and contracts in motion. Richard confirmed every detail. The sale was real, final, irreversible. My house, Margaret's and mine, was no longer a target for their greed. It was cash in motion, slipping through their fingers before they ever touched it. The next step was security. I called Frank, a locksmith with a reputation for speed and discretion. 2 hours later, he arrived in a van stocked with tools, his hands steady from decades of experience. He examined my front door and nodded. "These are solid locks, sir. Quality work. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them." I allowed myself a grim smile. That was me. He replaced every lock with modern silver deadbolts, handing me 3 sets of keys. There would be no paper trail leading back to Laura and Daniel. When they returned from Phoenix, their keys would fail, just as their plans had. Meanwhile, I packed the essentials: Margaret's jewelry box, the wedding photos, my engineering certificates, her favorite cookbook with her handwriting in the margins. Everything else, the furniture, the trinkets, the rooms filled with ghosts I left behind. I loaded my car and drove to Sunset Manor Apartments, where Mrs. Alvarez, a brisk but kind property manager, welcomed me. The 1-bedroom unit was small, furnished, and smelled faintly of industrial cleaner. It wasn't home, but it was mine. I signed the lease with cash, no questions asked. That evening, I ordered something critical: a wireless camera disguised as a phone charger. I had spent hours researching until I found the perfect model: Wi-Fi enabled, motion detection, crystal clear video. It would sit by the front door, watching silently, ready to capture the exact moment Laura and Daniel discovered what I had done. They would see my note, and the world would see their reaction. The letter was the hardest part. I sat at my small desk in the apartment, pen in hand, Margaret's voice echoing in my ears. I wrote slowly, carefully, in the handwriting she had always admired. "Laura and Daniel, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked. I heard your conversation. I heard you call me a burden. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safe, far from your reach. Your belongings are stored at Denver, moving in storage. You have 30 days to claim them. I gave you everything for 42 years. You repaid me with betrayal. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. When I finished, I read it 3 times, each word burning like a brand into the paper. This was not just a letter, it was justice. It was the mirror I would hold up to their faces. That night, as I set the pen down and folded the note into its envelope, I felt something shift deep inside me. For the first time since Margaret's death, I was no longer drifting. I was no longer waiting to be discarded. I had a plan, and tomorrow, the execution of that plan would begin. Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed. The notification flashed across the screen, motion detected. My heart leapt into my throat. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I opened the app, and the live feed from the tiny camera filled my screen. The driveway came into view, and there it was, Daniel's black SUV pulling in, shining under the spring sun like a hearse delivering its passengers to their fate. Laura stepped out first, stretching after the drive from Phoenix, her designer sunglasses perched on her nose. She looked confident, radiant even, as though she were returning to a prize already won. Daniel followed, dragging their suitcases onto the walkway. From the way they moved, you'd think they already owned the place, that I was simply a guest waiting to be escorted away. Laura fished through her purse, keys jingling, and walked up to the front door. She slipped the key into the lock, twisted and stopped, her brow furrowed. She tried again, harder this time, her lips pressed tight. Still nothing. I watched her shoulders stiffen as she jiggled the key, a hint of frustration creeping into her face. That's weird, she muttered. Daniel set the luggage down, walked up behind her. Let me try. The camera caught every detail, the shift in their confidence, the first crack in their certainty. Daniel jammed his key into the lock, twisted, rattled, cursed under his breath. Back door, he said quickly, already moving around the house. Laura stood frozen for a moment, her head tilting like she couldn't quite process what was happening. Then she followed, heels clicking against the pavement. Minutes later, they returned to the front porch, Daniel's face dark with alarm. Back door's locked. Garage remote isn't working either. Laura's voice rose, sharp and panicked. What do you mean that's impossible? Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths. The word impossible hung in the air like a curse. I sat in my apartment, miles away, watching their confidence crumble in real time. Desperation set in quickly. Daniel scanned the windows, spotted the kitchen one I had deliberately left unlocked. There, help me boost you up. Laura hesitated, then let him lift her through. She wriggled inside, her skirt catching on the sill, her face flushed with exertion and humiliation. Seconds later, she opened the front door from within, and Daniel dragged their suitcases inside. That was the moment they saw it, the envelope taped neatly at eye level on the inside of the door. My handwriting in bold black ink, Laura and Daniel. Laura's hands trembled as she pulled it down, tore the flap open, and began to read. The camera captured everything, her eyes darting across the words, her lips moving silently at first, then quivering. Daniel leaned over her shoulder, his face tightening as he read. And then it hit them, the full weight of what I had done. Laura's voice cracked into a scream. He sold the house. He actually sold it. She clutched the letter like it was a death notice. Daniel snatched it from her hand, reread, shaking his head in disbelief. $890,000. He spat, his voice rising. He kept it all. The old man played us. Laura began to cry, her carefully applied makeup streaking down her cheeks. That money was supposed to be our future. Daniel, our home in Boulder, our fresh start. He ruined everything. Daniel turned on her, his mask finally slipping. My fault. You should have handled this better. You promised me he trusted you completely. You swore he'd never see it coming. His words dripped with venom. Laura shot back, her voice trembling. You're the one who said he was deteriorating, that he couldn't live alone anymore. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. The argument exploded, raw and vicious, right there in the living room where Margaret once read bedtime stories to Laura. They hurled accusations. Their partnership cracking under the pressure of betrayal turned back on them. Daniel's voice thundered. We're homeless now. Our lease expires next week. What do you expect me to do? I lost my job 6 months ago, and you knew it. The confession hung in the air like a bomb. Laura froze. Her sobs caught in her throat. What she whispered. Daniel's face twisted with bitterness. You think financial firms are lining up to hire an advisor who got fired for questionable transactions? I've been hiding it because I didn't want you to panic, but now we've got nothing. I leaned back in my chair, watching through the camera as the truth devoured them. My daughter, who once believed she could outmaneuver me, was reduced to tears. Daniel, who treated me like a liability on his balance sheet, was unraveling before her eyes. They were trapped, not in a nursing home, but in the wreckage of their own lies. Laura dropped onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands. How could he do this to us, she sobbed. Daniel stood rigid, clutching the letter like it might catch fire, because he was smarter than both of us. We underestimated him. For the first time in years, I smiled. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was blind, confused, easy to manage. But the camera proved what I already knew: the so-called burden had outplayed them at their own game. The night after they discovered the truth, I sat alone in my new apartment at Sunset Manor. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom unit with plain furniture and the faint smell of industrial carpet cleaner, but it was mine. No ghosts of betrayal in the walls, no echoes of whispered conspiracies. I poured myself a glass of Bordeaux, the last bottle Margaret and I had saved for a special occasion. I decided this was as special as it would ever get justice finally served. The deep red swirled in the glass, catching the dim lamplight, and I lifted it slowly, staring out at the Denver skyline glowing against the night. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by grief alone. I felt something sharper, cleaner. I felt free. I took a sip, the taste bittersweet, and my thoughts drifted to Laura and Daniel. I pictured them standing in the empty shell of my old house, the letter trembling in their hands, the camera recording every second of their collapse. But losing the house was just the beginning of their punishment. The true consequences had only started to unfold. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Green, my neighbor of 20 years. She had noticed a lot of commotion the night before and wanted to make sure I was all right. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. By now, she would have spoken to others on the block, and word would be spreading. Laura and Daniel's mask of filial devotion, those practiced smiles at barbecues, those sweet words about taking care of Dad, was crumbling in real time. Neighbors talk, and in our neighborhood, they talk fast. I imagined Mrs. Green shaking her head, telling anyone who would listen, "Can you believe it? They planned to put Arthur in a nursing home and sell his house. After everything he did for them, the shame alone would sting Laura more than any words I could write. She had built her identity around being the devoted daughter, the one who checked in on her lonely father. Now, the very people she wanted to impress with her devotion would see her for what she truly was. Daniel wouldn't fare any better. His friends had always admired him for marrying into such a good family, bragging about my generosity at their backyard gatherings. But now those same friends would see the truth: he was jobless, living off the man he had plotted to discard, and exposed as a fraud in front of everyone who mattered. Men like Daniel thrive on image, and nothing destroys an image faster than exposure. I sat back in my chair, savoring the wine, imagining the whispers chasing them wherever they went. At the grocery store, at church, even at work functions, people would glance at them with pity or contempt. Isn't that the couple who tried to steal from her own father? Reputation is currency, and theirs was bankrupt. Margaret's voice returned to me in memory, soft but resolute. Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful. I had failed that lesson once, But not this time. This time, gratitude would be forced upon them, carved into their lives by loss and humiliation. That night I thought about the long arc of betrayal and revenge. They had called me a burden, a liability, a man slipping into confusion. But in the end, it was they who were lost, confused, broken by their own greed. I had nothing left to prove. The money sat secure in my new account, my essentials carefully placed in the apartment around me. I didn't need the mansion we built. What I needed was dignity, and I had reclaimed it. I raised my glass once more toward Margaret's photo, now perched on the nightstand beside my bed. To you, my love, to justice, to freedom. The wine burned in my throat, but it tasted like victory out there in Denver. Laura and Daniel would spend the coming weeks drowning in the consequences of their own betrayal. They had lost not only a house worth nearly $1 million, but also the one thing they could never buy back: respect. The neighbors would never forget. Their friends would never forgive. Their marriage, already cracking under the weight of lies, would shatter completely. And me, I wasn't anyone's burden anymore. I was Arthur Miller, a man who had built his life with his own hands and refused to let it be stolen. Let them stew in their disgrace. My revenge was complete, and it was righteous. In the days that followed, I never once picked up the phone when it rang. Laura tried every method: calls from her number, blocked numbers, even messages through mutual friends. I let them all go unanswered. Silence was its own kind of reply, louder than any argument I could have made. My words had already been written in that letter taped to the door, and their reactions had been captured forever by the little camera blinking silently in the corner. I didn't need to see them in person. I didn't need to confront them face to face. My revenge was complete, and my dignity had been restored. But late at night, when the apartment around me grew quiet and the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound, I would find myself staring out at the city lights and thinking of Margaret. She had always been the bridge in our family, the one who softened edges, who turned conflict into conversation. Without her, words between Laura and me had hardened into silence, into calculation, into betrayal. And yet, even now, I could almost hear her voice reminding me, Arthur, she's still your daughter. That thought lingered, not as an invitation to forgive, but as a reminder of what had been lost. I didn't want vengeance to consume me. I wanted clarity. I wanted truth. And so, in the quiet of my apartment, I spoke aloud, not to Laura, not to Daniel, not even to the empty room, but to myself, to Margaret, and perhaps to anyone who might one day hear my story. I was never a burden. I was always my own man. Those words came from a place deeper than anger. They were a declaration, a manifesto carved out of years of sacrifice, betrayal, and survival. I had been generous. Yes, I had been trusting, maybe even naive, but I had never been helpless. I had built my home with my own two hands. I had paid for Laura's education, her wedding, her future. I had carried the weight of family without complaint. A burden does not build. A burden does not sacrifice. A burden does not endure. If Laura ever hears those words, and I believe she will, they will strike differently than any punishment I could deliver. They will remind her of who I truly was, not the confused old man she thought she could manipulate, but the father who gave her everything she had, the man who stood tall even when the world tried to shrink him. And maybe in some quiet moment, when her anger fades and her pride breaks, she will realize the truth: she had not betrayed a burden. She had betrayed her father. I imagine her someday sitting alone, perhaps in a smaller apartment after the bolder dream evaporates, replaying those words in her mind. I was never a burden. I was always my own man. They will echo in the silence she created, forcing her to reckon not only with what she lost, but with what she chose to destroy. That is the reconciliation she will have to carry: the knowledge that I never hated her, never wished her ill, but simply demanded to be seen for who I was. And for the audience who hears my story, for every man or woman who has ever felt discarded, devalued, treated as though their worth ended with their youth. I want those words to resonate. Too many elders are silenced, tucked away, called burdens by the very families they built. But the truth is simpler. Stronger, we are not burdens. We are survivors, builders, givers. We are our own people. I poured another glass of Bordeaux and whispered the words again, savoring their weight. I was never a burden. I was always my own man. Outside my window, Denver glowed with possibility. My life was not over. It had been reclaimed. Laura and I may never sit across the same table again. We may never share laughter in the way we once did, but reconciliation does not always come through embraces or apologies. Sometimes it comes through truth cold, clear, undeniable truth. She will have to carry it with her, just as I carry Margaret's words. And in that balance, perhaps, lies a strange kind of peace. That night, I stood by the window of my small apartment, the hum of the city alive beneath me. Denver's skyline shimmered with golden lights, each one a reminder that life, no matter how bruised, still carries promise. I lifted my glass of Bordeaux, took one last sip, and allowed myself a quiet smile. For the first time since Margaret's passing, my chest felt light. The chains of betrayal had been broken, not by anger alone, but by reclaiming what was mine. I thought of Laura then, of the tears streaking down her face as she read my letter, of the raw panic when the reality of her choices finally came crashing down. I didn't hate her. No hatred is too simple. What I felt was heavier, but purer. A lesson had been delivered, and whether she wanted it or not, she would carry it forever. Family betrayal can destroy trust, but revenge can restore dignity. That was the truth I had carved out of my pain. The truth I wanted her and the world to remember. I was never the burden she imagined me to be. I was never the confused old man she mistook me for. I was Arthur Miller, a builder, a husband, a father. I was my own man, and I always would be. That knowledge steadied me more than any apology ever could. It was the resolution to a wound that had festered too long. As I looked out across the glowing city, I realized this wasn't just my story. It was a story for every person who has ever felt discarded by the ones they love, who has been made to feel like their worth expired with their youth. To them, I say you are not a burden. You are the sum of your sacrifices, your battles, your victories, and you deserve to be seen. If my story stirred something inside you, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal or the fire of reclaiming your dignity, share it in the comments. Your voice matters more than you think. Save this video as a reminder of your own strength, because one day you may need to hear it again. And if you want more stories that speak the truths others are too afraid to tell, subscribe to this channel. Together, we will uncover what families hide. And in doing so, we will find the dignity they tried to take away. I raised my glass one final time, whispered Margaret's name, and let the lights of Denver wash over me. The world would remember me not as anyone's burden, but as a man who refused to be erased.